Okay, so thank you for attending our first session. Again, this is Data Days Back to the Basics, and so we're just trying to share some knowledge and spread the word on Georgia Tech data and hopefully get everyone up to speed on that that aspect of things. So this session is called Exploring the Data Landscape at Georgia Tech. And what we're going to talk about are the resources that are available to you here at Tech. So what data services is and what they do, and that'll be Nick Chaviano. And then enterprise reporting, that will be Andre Goodman. He'll go over that. And then I will talk about what institutional research and planning can do for you and what we do for Georgia Tech campus. That'll be followed by talk about data governance from Zach Hayes. And then cybersecurity, we'll touch on that. And then we'll also talk about artificial intelligence. And at the end, we'll have time permitting, we'll have time for Q&A. And if you do have questions, please feel free to throw those into the chat, and we'll make a note of those, or we'll try to answer them as we go. But yes, the program does say a break at 10:15, but if we are having good discussion and lots of questions, and we'll kind of carry forward there and continue with that. But with that, I will hand it over to Nick to talk about data resources.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much, Jason. My name is Nick Chaviano. I'm the Director of Data Services here at Georgia Institute of Technology. Data Services is a group that is part of OIT and is nested inside of a department called Enterprise Applications and Data Integrations. And so just to piggyback off of what Jason said, the point and purpose of this presentation is to, give participants an understanding of what data resources are available to them. With that, I'd like to do a brief introduction to what data services is at Georgia Tech, just so participants can leave a little bit of understanding of that and how they can interact with us. So first and foremost, this is our data services mission. And while this is a lot of words, I'd like to distill this down to what I've highlighted in bold to help give an understanding of what we do for the university. So first and foremost, we serve as trusted advisors to the campus community. And our goal is to empower our stakeholders through high quality data and serve as technical leaders, embodying a true partnership approach. And so data services is comprised of three core competencies, and that's enterprise reporting, integrations, and data warehousing. And so with those three kind of core components and platforms and databases, I'll walk through a little bit about what that means and different services that the campus community can take advantage of. So first and foremost is enterprise data warehousing. And so the main goal of what data services is trying to do is create a single source of truth. So as you may or may not know, there are many different sources of information all across Georgia Tech. And so, there's Banner for our student information system, or OneUSG Connect for our HR system, or Workday for our finance system, alongside hundreds of other systems across campus. It's quite difficult for somebody to, connect to each and every one of those systems and try to, create analytics or reports or generate important data from all of those myriad systems. So the goal of data services is to try to connect to all the systems at Georgia Tech, house it in one single location, and define rules and business logic on top so that reporting and analytics can be done. So one of the key groups that's responsible for that is our enterprise data warehousing team. And that's what they do. They identify those business processes. They generate source to target mapping, which is like our map of where we're defining elements from the source systems and how they're ultimately displayed to an end user in a report or in the database, et cetera. And so, they create those data elements, which are then used for integrations, for reporting, or for analytics. Additionally, we have an enterprise integrations team, and this is the pushing and pulling of data from one system to another. So, think about like there's all of these, CRM systems across campus. Let's just as an example, Salesforce team uses, it's a system that's been purchased. It needs data in order to function. So the integrations team here at Georgia Tech will take data from the systems that need to feed into to Salesforce and then drive data into those systems so that it can be fully supported. And so there's, thousands of integrations that are happening to help support the different systems across campus and to make sure that they function properly. Lastly, is enterprise reporting, and Andre Goodman is going to present right after me and talk a little bit more about the enterprise reporting team and some of the functionality there. So I'll leave that to him. And lastly, all of the data and systems that are supported within data services are supported by our enterprise platform and databases team. And so this team has the infrastructure that we use, so like databases or our Azure environment for cloud services, et cetera. And so they also help maintain some of the big systems that we have across campus, like Tableau or Cognos or Power BI, et cetera. And so what's great is throughout data days, there's going to be some specific hands-on training from IRP to show how to use Power BI, from Andre Goodman and the rest of the data services team and enterprise reporting team to show how to use Tableau, and a few other hands-on trainings as well. So there's definitely more to come in terms of taking advantage of some of the platforms. So what does data services aim to prevent? Again, it's trying to prevent inconsistencies and definitions when trying to report across the myriad systems. So imagine trying to answer a simple question, which is, how many students are currently enrolled at Georgia Tech? Well, depending on who you ask and when you ask and what system is leveraged, you might come up with different answers to the same question. And so data services really is a group that's trying to prevent the multiple inconsistent answers, data reliability and validity issues, and housing it all together in a single source of truth. Lastly, I won't spend too much time on this, but the data services team has an extensive data reference model, which we leverage to highlight how we're bringing in data into our ecosystem and how we're working to bring that data to different customers all across campus. One thing that we do One thing that we do as well is, we're more than happy to talk to any customer or group across campus about these different lanes which we have to showcase how we're bringing in data into our data lake repository, modeling that data, and then ultimately delivering it, whether that's to an individual researcher, to an extended system, or through one of our myriad reporting tools. But with that, I'll hand it over to Andre, who's going to talk about the enterprise reporting team.
Thanks, Nick. We can go ahead and advance our slides. All right, so as you all can imagine, the data landscape at Tech is fairly vast and is constantly growing. And so as more systems come online, data services is responsible for developing, reporting, and integrations that connect the dots between these systems. Our teams are responsible for quickly ramping up internal knowledge about these systems so that our campus community can be provided reporting solutions they need to make data-informed decisions. So what does that all look like practically? So first, we deliver our reporting via our Lite web portal, which you can find at lite.godtech.edu. These reports come in a myriad of different examples. We do reports related to trending across all of our ERP systems, list reports for those of you who need to get, say, a list of students that matches certain criteria. We also do dashboards that allow you to dive into data, do drill downs, do comparisons. We also do reporting that relies heavily on visualizations. So being able to see the flow of students from their beginning journey and admissions all the way to their degree outcomes. And we also do year-over-year comparisons where you can look at how data is trending over several different years in comparison to each other. And so these are sort of all the different types of reporting solutions that we provide our campus. But in addition to what we do in terms of reporting, we also understand that ultimately, given the complexity and the amount of data that's on our campus, we can't serve every single request. And so a few years back, we developed a self-service model that allows campus units to have individuals inside their units that are interested in developing reports to actually develop reports specifically for their units. And we have three stages of this process. The first stage to this is onboarding our developers. So we do a needs assessment to get a sense of what you actually need, helping you understand the level of commitment to being onboarded, the cost that may be occurred to your campus unit if you'd like to be self-service, which technically starts at $0. So that's a really great benefit. Our second stage is doing an engagement where we do consultations. We deliver statistics, usage statistics for any reports that you build, handle any of the permission changes that you may need for those of you who want to share reports to different campus units outside of your department. We also do quite a bit of knowledge sharing in terms of our Lunch and Learn series, as well as we do things like participate in data days. The last stage is the maintenance piece where we do check-ins with our customers. We also continuously develop Tableau data sources so that those of you who are working with maybe unique systems can also get your data ingested into our reference model so that you can build data sources, build reports specifically off of your data. We also spend a lot of time with data governance so that we make sure that the data that you're being given, you don't have the opportunity it's accidentally shared to individuals who shouldn't have it. So this is the three stages that we deploy for our self-service, and ultimately encapsulates our commitment to providing campus units with the opportunity to not only have reporting from us, but also be able to develop reporting for themselves as well.
All right, thanks, Nick, and thanks, Andre. And again, if y'all have any questions, feel free to throw those into the chat. So I will talk about institutional research and planning. My name is Jason Wang. I am the Senior Director of Institutional Research and Planning here at Georgia Tech. I do have a number of staff who I wouldn't be able to do all this work without them. And so you can find them at this link here. You can look at all of our profiles. So who is IRP? Well, the Office of Institutional Research and Planning, we are a research and analytics service. We support the Georgia Tech community. We obtain, analyze, and interpret data to help with the campus's decision-making, right? So at the end of the day, we are a support service to Georgia Tech. And our vision is that we're hoping that we can get as much data together and good data and good analysis and good information so that campus can make these important decisions that help us with our growth, with change management, with all sorts of things. So get skipped over. There we go. Okay, so our services cover a number of kind of major buckets here. And so while we do provide certain data products, we also provide services like conducting research. We definitely curate data. If you send a request to us, we'll collect data from the GT systems and pull all that together and package it nicely for you. We help with decision support across campus, right? Whether it has to do with enrollment management or budgeting or having to do with grant proposals. And then, of course, planning support. We do have a number of products on our website. So if you navigate to our website, you'll see we have a number of infographics. A couple of our biggest products are the common data set and the fact book that we release every year towards the beginning of the year, around January to February, March time. And so definitely make your way over there. Those are kind of our biggest products that folks hit on our website. I did also want to just let everyone know that there are lots of consumers of Georgia Tech data. And so IRP is involved with a lot of these various organizations, whether it's working with the USG to collect Georgia Tech data, or working with various academic community organizations for collecting data. We also submit data to the various guidebook publishers and rankings organizations. And then, of course, to the federal agencies. So the biggest piece there is IPEDS, if you are familiar with that. So we do a lot of reporting and compliance, and so Georgia Tech's data goes to a lot of different places, but not just externally, but internally as well, right? We, of course, all of y'all are our customers, and so we help with accreditation, institute strategic initiatives, research and reports, academic program reviews, any grant proposals or grant renewals, and any other really data requests across campus. So if you can't find it, you can't access the data that you need through the self-service that Andre was talking about, then a lot of times coming to IRP will be your solution there. So reach out if you need support. You can visit our website. You can submit a request via our website and using our support email, or you can, of course, find us in ServiceNow and submit a request in that way. That's it for IRP. Let's move on to data governance. If Zach, is Zach on? Let's see. Oh, I do not see Zach on the meeting, so we may need to bump ahead to the next section and come back to data governance. Let's jump ahead to cybersecurity. I believe, John, you are on. You can take control of the presentation if you want and present on your portion.
Okay, let's see. Get this to work.
Oh, there's Zach. Actually, Zach just popped on. Zach, do you want, actually, we can pop back over to data governance if you want to do that.
Yes, that would be great.
All right.
Apologies for the calendar mix-up.
No worries. Feel free to take control of the slides. The top left of your screen, there should be a button that says take control.
Ah, okay. One moment. All right, I think I'm there. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. I want to talk just a little bit about data governance and how it fits into this larger picture and conversation that we're having this morning. This really is just a conversation starter. There is so many topics that we could dive deeper into, but we just don't have enough time this morning. So I want to touch on just a few of the points. What Georgia Tech's data framework is, what are some of our key program components, and what are some of the key roles and responsibilities as it relates to data. So at Tech, we've got a data framework that we work around. At the bottom here in the red, you see technology governance. This is really when folks buy what I call new toys, the new business applications, the new shiny thing that helps collect data, create data, et cetera. That's really our first layer of governance here when those business applications and data assets are brought in. On top of that is our data governance component of this framework. Within data governance, we've got our data management and protection folks. So folks that are helping manage the data, keep our data protected from a security standpoint, keep our data protected from a privacy standpoint, our access to data. All of these folks really work closely together to manage and protect our data. And that falls within our data governance components, where we create the structure and the roles and the responsibilities, et cetera. But why do we do all of this? The focus really isn't around technology governance or data governance. Those are very important and key pieces of this framework. But ultimately, we do all of this to create data services. We need data back in your hands to be able to make data-informed decisions, carry out various business functions and processes. So we layer these so that we support our data services folks, our folks in IRP, our folks that are managing the warehouse and the business intelligence reports, all of these different components and services that are getting the data back in your hands and using it in its most beneficial way. And then along the right-hand side, we've got our checks and balances. These are our folks that are just making sure that we're staying within our appropriate lanes, and following rules and regulations and other policies. So who are some of those key folks that fit within that framework? If you look at the colors here, we've got our data management and protection in the blue, we've got our data services type folks in the purple, and then we've got our checks and balance folks in the gold. So if we look at this very simplified organizational chart, you see our data management and protection groups here in the blue boxes. Within information technology, we've got our data governance and discovery team. That's the group that I lead. We also have cybersecurity, which we'll hear from John Karrh here in a moment. We've got identity and access management. Within the Office of General Counsel, we have privacy. And then within the library, we have our records management folks. These are the data management and protection teams that work very closely together. And then our data services folks. We've got our warehouse and integrations and business intelligence team that's part of central IT. We've got institutional research as part of finance and planning. These are the folks that are providing these services back to you, getting the data back in your hands in a meaningful way. And then finally, our checks and balances group, we've got ethics and compliance that are part of the Office of General Counsel. And then we also have our Office of Internal Audit. So what are some of the key components of the data governance and discovery program? We really have two primary lanes. One is the data governance side of what we do. This is creating these structures that I've just reviewed, defining roles and responsibilities, creating the policies and standards that the Institute needs, committees that bring folks together to make the policies and standards and decisions that we need across the enterprise, our data domains, making sure all of our data fits into appropriate buckets or sub buckets of data so that we know the roles and responsibilities, how we categorize our data, giving a more common language to the data that we use, knowledge and training, making sure we have data literacy across the organization, and then assurance, making sure we're following USG, state, federal, tech, whatever the policies or guidelines or standards are. So that's really the data governance side of what we do. On the other side is our data discovery. This is the fun part. This is where we help find all of our data assets across the Institute. Where are all of these assets that are creating or using data, and how do we elevate those to the enterprise level so that we can use them in meaningful ways? So creating an inventory of those data assets, digging into those assets and learning about the types of data elements that exist within them, defining those so that we have a shared common language, and then also business terms. What does currently enrolled student actually mean? And I'm looking at Jason to see if his face winces here. Those are the types of the things we help out as well. What are the data elements that make that up for a business term? From a data lineage perspective, just really understanding how these assets connect to each other, at least at a high level, so we understand how data flows. Where is it created and where does ultimately it flow to? And then finally, our group really helps connect the dots between all of these various players under this space, working very closely with cybersecurity, privacy, access, all the types of data services that are offered around warehousing and business intelligence and integrations and dashboarding and all of that. And really just helping connect folks across campus, whether you're in a business area or a technology area or a data area. So of those components, again, we could dive deep into each of them. I just want to touch on three this morning. One is policies. USG does have policies in the Business Procedures Manual, Section 12, around data governance. USG also has an IT handbook that is more technical focused, that also has requirements around data governance. We also have a Georgia Tech data governance and management policy, which is in our policy library. It's very important that anyone that uses enterprise data, creates enterprise data, touches enterprise data, understands their roles and responsibilities is laid out in these policies. From a data categorization standpoint, I mentioned that categorizations really help us understand our data better. It simplifies it and creates a common language for how we can describe our data. Right now, Georgia Tech has various types of categorizations. The first one is a data protection categorization. This defines all of our data as either being public or protected. Public data is any data that was originally intended for the public's consumption. Anything else is protected data. So that really means most of Tech's data is protected. We don't create or collect data for the public. We have things like websites and newsletters and other artifacts that, sure, those are created for the public. But everything else is really for Georgia Tech business, and that is protected data. It is important to recognize that although protected data may be subject to disclosure through like the Georgia Open Records Act, it doesn't make that data categorized as public. So if you think about FERPA directory information, that is information that we may disclose. We don't have to, but we may disclose to the public. That data was not originally created and collected for the public. They may have access to it, but it is still protected data. Data regulation categorization, I just mentioned FERPA. Knowing what types of regulations impact our data or are governed is very important. So if it's student data, FERPA is applied to it. If it's related to health and health insurance information, then HIPAA would apply. GLBA is the regulation that covers financial information. Finally, we have a sensitive data categorization. This is one of our newer categorizations that was created within the last year or so. This is a defined list of data elements that really elevate more to a sensitive level. We need to be careful about if we're including these types of elements in things like emails or how it's being used, how it's being shared, etc. This would include things like government identification, banking information, performance evaluations, etc. I'm sorry? All right. Next, I wanted to touch on our data domain registry. I mentioned data domains are how we create buckets of data, and within those buckets, smaller buckets. So think about all the data at Georgia Tech. We've got student data. Student is a data domain. Human resources is a data domain. Finance is a data domain. Within those, we have smaller buckets of data. It's important that we create these buckets, these data domains, so that we understand who is responsible for this data. Every bit of data at Georgia Tech should roll up to a responsible data steward, associate data trustee, et cetera. These are the folks that ultimately have responsibility for the data. These are the folks you would go to for questions about that data. These are the folks you would go to for permission to use or share this data. And the final thing I wanted to touch on this morning is just roles and responsibilities. In our Georgia Tech policy, we've defined roles and responsibilities starting at the very top with our data owner. This is the president of the institute. Our president has ultimate authority and responsibility for any data at Georgia Tech. From there, we drop down to data trustees, or those at the executive vice president or cabinet level. We continue to drop down to our associate data trustees that are typically vice presidents that oversee large data domains. And then once you get into a data domain, We've got folks more at the director department level that are responsible for creating and using the data, like our data stewards, associate data stewards. On the technology side of things, those that are managing our business assets like Banner or Workday and everything in between. We've got asset owners, technical managers, data administrators. On the right-hand side, this is probably more of the audience we have at Data Days this year. These are folks that are integration developers or warehouse developers, BI developers, application developers, subject matter experts, analysts, but probably our largest crowd is data users. Each of these are defined roles that we have. And it's important to understand that anytime you're using Georgia Tech data, creating it, using it, sharing it, you too have responsibilities that go into that. So that's what I have today. I'm happy to answer any questions during our Q&A at the end. Also, feel free to reach out to me or our team for anything related to data governance. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Zach. I think we are now going to move on to cybersecurity with John Karrh. So, John, if you want to try and take control, let's see if that works out for you. Hey, there we go.
Okay. Let's see if it'll let me. Okay. And for everybody, my name is John Karrh, and I am the manager of the Governance, Risk, and Compliance Unit in Cybersecurity Programs. And I want to thank Zach, because Zach covered a bunch of information that we kind of work directly with his group, and as well as a lot of other members within Office of Information Technology and cybersecurity as well. So in the governance GRC unit, in my case, we're a small unit. We have 5 employees, and we cover a lot of different information around the entire institute and have our fingers in a lot of cookie jars. So to give kind of everybody an understanding of what a GRC unit does, we're integrated at the institution level. Even though we're within cybersecurity, we manage a lot of the governance structures, assess risks, and ensure adherence to a lot of the regulations that occur. Doesn't mean we do it ourselves, but we are partners with a lot of the other units within OIT and cybersecurity, as well as around the entire institute. The strategic importance of that is that that GRC framework aligns with the institution's data and the management practices, and in regards to the overall mission of the institute and our strategic objectives. So an example of that is that, kind of going back to the DataX platform that Zach mentioned earlier, a lot of those GRC principles that exist for protection of data, as well as usage of data, is inherently invisible to most users on campus. They don't ever see this. This is something that, the GRC is probably, if you want to call, we're proud of that. We're involved, but if it's done right, you really don't notice it. And so that alignment is what's critical here. So as we move past that, we're going to talk a little bit about the basics of cybersecurity under the GRC. And I'm going to say this is, again, not stuff that we necessarily do ourselves, but again, it's in coordination with a lot of other units within cybersecurity, data governance, and the other data areas, including data stewards and data trustees and so forth. So our goal is that strong foundation within cybersecurity itself, as well as kind of simplifying those core concepts into something that's manageable and actionable. And again, that's the part I was mentioning earlier. If it's done right, it's really almost invisible. So as we move past that, we kind of go into those fundamental concepts of data integrity. So we've talked a little bit about data confidentiality. Zach brought that up, and we're going to talk about that briefly in a second too. But one of the other key important issues is data integrity, and that is making sure that the data in that DataX platform and the data that the university institute holds remains accurate and consistent, and it's not altered at any time during its life cycle. So, and then it moves back down into those, what are the principles that they should be remain reliable no matter what system they're in, and then they're checked for accuracy. And some of that accuracy check will be things like digital signatures and things like that. And again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of what we do unless somebody wants to talk more about that. But the idea here is to kind of give you an idea that the GRC, cybersecurity, all the data areas are concerned about all of those things. When you think about the CIA triad for cybersecurity, it's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Availability is important, but the accuracy of that data and the confidentiality of that data is extremely important. So as we kind of move from there to the confidentiality pieces, and that's something Zach brought up earlier in his part of the talk, talking about those regulations and the policies, and it could go down to procedures and processes as well, and protecting that sensitive data from things like unauthorized access or unauthorized alterations. You know, making sure that the people who should be able to see it can, but the people who can't will not gain access to that. Making sure that that data is encrypted and locked in place so that if it was to get out, that it's not usable by the person who steals that data. And so examples of that are things like password protection or multi-factor. And so as we move through, people are familiar with a lot of these things that we do, things that are covered in our cybersecurity awareness training that happens twice a year, things that you look at the various policies and standards that we have on campus as well as at USG that go around for protection of that data. So the other piece that's important, and again, it's coordinated with a lot of various units as well. And the biggest unit for us for that is not only Zach's unit, but also with Office of General Counsel with their risk management program, is those proactive safeguards. You know, Zach identifies the data as part of his. He's got those protections that he's working on. Ours is kind of a validation check on that, as well as looking at what vulnerabilities from a cybersecurity perspective are in place and what do we need to do with those vulnerabilities are identified to protect that data and protect the integrity of that data as well. And then if there is an incident, what are the response plans for that data? So our Cybersecurity Operations Center has the plans for that. They manage that portion of it, and our goal is to ensure those plans from the GRC perspective cover what needs to be covered from the stance of confidentiality and integrity. And then that goes back for things, and I put it in here as an opportunity because it goes beyond just cybersecurity and data governance, but collaboration between all units at the Institute. And that includes the colleges and end users as well. So as we move in, my last slide, is I just want to really say the goal here from a GRC perspective is incorporating these principles with overall data governance, but it provides us a holistic review of institutional data management, compliance, risk mitigation. But the big thing for us is that it aligns us with the strategic objectives of the Institute. And that is the first and foremost piece of what we do in the GRC, is make sure that all of our efforts align with strategic objectives. So I'll answer any questions later if anybody has anything, but I'm going to now pass it back. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So what we'll do here is we'll hand it off to Brent to talk about artificial intelligence at Tech.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Just to confirm, y'all saw the slide move forward, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, cool. Just making sure I got control here. All right. Thank you, everyone. My name's Brent O'Gwen. I'm a technology strategist and architect with OIT. And a lot of my time, really over the last year and a half, has been dedicated to artificial intelligence. And when we throw out the word artificial intelligence and what that means to a place like Georgia Tech, it's an extremely complex answer. I like this slide because it shows really kind of this range of the different technologies that can fall under the artificial intelligence umbrella. Some of these we know, some of these we're using, some of these are happening in the background and have been happening in the background of a lot of our applications for years. Artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. Chatbots came out in the mid 60s. So these, a lot of these are not new technologies, but we've gotten a lot more focus on these technologies, especially with the availability that tools like ChatGPT and now other things like Copilot and Gemini are bringing to AI. And that's a lot of times, a lot of people, when they say, oh, how are we going to use AI? It's very common that that's what they're talking to, but I want to open it up, a little bit wider. We're not going to get into all the different types of artificial intelligence today, because I think that back to the basics, I want to focus on, really what we can do rather than, let's say, a wide range of all the different definitions of AI. And, I've seen more than once people get in arguments, even trying to define exactly what falls within artificial intelligence and what doesn't. But what's really important, right, is what can we do with it? So when we look at an organization like Georgia Tech and we try to define, what are we doing with AI? And just a simple example, we may be using some types of AI within A&F, within the administrative side, supporting the teaching and learning in their use of AI to prepare a course teaching AI that educates a graduate student who is using AI to support research on AI. So all of those different angles may be different types of artificial intelligence with different types of objectives. And then again, at all of those different angles, we may have individual uses at a team level, and then uses at an enterprise level. So if you feel a little bit overwhelmed on exactly what AI means and who and what kind of technology we might be, it's a really complicated question. But luckily for today, we're going to zoom in a little bit more on this individual level and say, what can we take away? What can we use immediately? And then we'll dig a little bit into what's coming and what tools that we are making available, to really enable that responsible use of AI, with the goal of, everyone on this call being able to access it, not just developers, not just people who are very into technology, but the current state of AI is that it's widely available for everyone. So I really want to focus in on the generative AI components and first, why would we want to learn this? Why is this valuable? This was actually from a study, and there are several other studies out there, but this is one of my favorites still, around really looking at, it was between Harvard Business School and Boston Consulting Group, and looking at knowledge worker tasks, right? Things like building prototypes, building project plans, drafting emails, things a lot of us do all the time. And they trained one group in using GPT-4, which is a model at the time was behind ChatGPT. There's more advanced models available now, also behind Copilot. And what they found is that people were accomplishing these tasks 25% more quickly with 40% higher quality. And, really what that means is, not only were we getting more done, but I think the real value here was that it was coming in at higher quality. And that's a really important piece, because I think, a lot of times when we think about AI generated content, AI generated things, we think about producing lower quality things faster. But really, when you leverage AI, in a trained way, in a responsible way, you can actually produce higher quality items. And that's what we all do, right? We don't want the quality of our work to drop. We want the quality of our work to increase and really spend less effort on doing that. And something that, we really find, and we're seeing with groups that have worked with this tool over time and really kind of brought AI into their group or their individual work as more of a thought partner rather than just purely executing on something like building a project plan, is it really goes further, because it helps us identify the types of work that we need to be doing and brainstorming. And there's just a lot that we can do here beyond just executing a little bit more quickly. So, when we first think, right, when we're first exposed, we think, here's what I can do as a human. And then our natural first set is, here's that subset of things that maybe I can just offload to an AI to help with, right? I like to think this of sometimes it's like, hey, we're doing long division out there somewhere, and now we've got a calculator and we can just calculate and save some time, right? And this is a great time saver, absolutely a wonderful way to use AI. But when we think a little bit wider of what if I combine those capabilities with the AI, what we're able to do actually extends a little bit wider. And that's really, I think, fundamentally what we want out of AI, right? It may not always be available to us, but it's possible. And this is the promise, right? Like this is the promise of AI at a wider level of it's not just going to take part of our job away. It's saying when we work with that power of AI, right? When we grant these superpowers to a person, we can accomplish, more. And that doesn't necessarily just mean more widgets created, right? This means, hopefully we're creating things that we didn't even know were possible before and really kind of stepping into new strategic and innovative directions. And that's the really exciting part. So when it comes to these tools, we've partnered pretty heavily with Microsoft at this point. Now, this is just some of the co-pilots that Microsoft throws out there, right? We don't have all of these tools today, but what I really want to focus on is this Copilot Enterprise. And we will talk a little bit about a few other tools because Copilot Enterprise is available to everyone who has a Microsoft account, which should be, I think, everyone who's at least from Georgia Tech on this call. A lot of other institutions, higher ed institutions have the same licensing. You also have access to the Copilot Enterprise. So this is available for everyone. And there's a lot of advantages here that I want to get to. And if anyone wants to log in and see this for later, this is the link to get to the Copilot. And there's a few things that I want to point out. If you see in the upper right-hand corner, it's first of all being logged in with your Georgia Tech credentials. And then you see this, this kind of clear shield there. And if you were to hover over it, it'll show that we have, this enterprise data protection, which really gives us an advantage over other private tools. So everyone has this. We can definitely start looking at it, and we'll look a little bit more at this in just a second. One note before we jump in, and I think this really kind of highlights a lot of the things here that have been brought up. Data privacy. If you're using a free tool, like if you have a personal ChatGPT account, this is not a private tool. Everything loaded into that tool should be considered in public, right? So absolutely out for any sort of consumption. Assume it's put on Georgia Tech's web, the front of Georgia Tech's website, or you've posted it on your Facebook, right? So any of those free tools, and this is the, really one of the best advantages of the Copilot, the Microsoft Copilot, is that we have, that enterprise data protection. We don't run the same risks that we do, so it really provides a lot more protection. The next piece is hallucinations. Right? Even inside of Copilot, they can and will produce factually wrong information. I know this is especially tricky for researchers or for people that are really using this to find facts. So if you're looking for facts, you can ask for references. You want to cross-reference any facts that you do find. And then finally, there's biases involved. There's certain biases built in from the training data that was out there, and it does have expertise limits, right? Like this is not a replacement for your doctor. This is not a replacement for legal. If you're modifying a contract or you're looking at generative AI input on something, you still want to work with those experts. And we're still the experts in our own areas and need to provide that expertise, right? It's not a replacement for our expertise, but it can help bridge that communication gap between your expertise and someone else's, or the other way around, where if someone sends you something you don't understand, you can help decipher what it means, but it's not a replacement for that person. So just real quick, right? So when we engage with something like Copilot, and this is a simple example, we can say, I want to find a place to go on vacation. And this works great, by the way. I actually use this to plan vacations quite often. I actually worked with someone who planned their honeymoon like this. And it can ask me some information like, well, where would you want to travel? And I give it some information about what I want and what I'm looking for, right? And some things about, I even want a kitchen. So it comes back with a few different locations to give me some ideas on where I may want to travel. And if you see coming up here, right, if you're really interested in international travel, I highly suggest Scottsdale, Arizona. So, you know, and I let this in here on purpose because, again, it does make mistakes. This is not unusual to come across a mistake. But, you know, actually, I don't want to fly anywhere. It's going to be a short trip. So I can narrow in my search a little bit. And this is big because, you know, we don't have to get our prompts perfect. We can have a conversation with Copilot to get a little bit closer to where we want to go. And then once I've done this kind of research and this brainstorming, well, I can actually then create an itinerary and say, you know, tell me what I might want to do while I'm up in Blue Ridge for the weekend. And this is great, right? And now, you know, think about the possibilities here. If we're brainstorming something, we've got a project plan built. But one thing I really like about AI is it can help me think about what I need to think about to get better answers. So you can see, you know, where I left it here is I was saying, you know what, I want to refine this itinerary further. But instead of me thinking about what I want to refine, hey, Copilot, why don't you tell me what I need to think about? And this is really a big leap to me in working with AI, is it can really help you as that thought partner, not just as an executor, right? And no matter what we were trying to do here, right? I set a context. Hey, I need help building a new job description. Help me draft this initial job description based on this information. And then from that, why don't we now make it match our current Georgia Tech standard? Oh, and by the way, you know, then we can just keep going from there, right? I could keep going from this further of, hey, now write my out of office message, right? Right. You can keep moving once you've got this strong context. And that's, you know, that's really a huge benefit of working with AI is just how far you can extend. And, you know, one of the biggest challenges is it's not a depth, it's a breadth of this exploration that really brings you in to understanding really what's possible. And, you know, if you can text a friend, you can start interacting with Copilot right away and, you know, within a very short time, start finding some very valuable use cases. Now, will you do some things that don't work? Absolutely. Even after a year and a half of using this very heavily, I try things and they don't work. It's a little bit more of an art than a science, in my opinion, on uncovering new use cases, but sometimes it doesn't work. And sometimes you get a home run, right? There's quite often when we run workshops where we'll spend 2 hours in a workshop and someone will be so excited because they saved 3 or 4 times that much time because they found something very critical to do for their work. And that's, you know, that's available for all of us right now. When we looked, I think, a little further down the road in the OIT space, there's really 3 tools that we're looking at underneath the Microsoft umbrella, I think, as our primary enablers of the use cases that get identified as, you know, initial targets. Number one, you know, this looking at Copilot from Microsoft 365, which really takes that web and integrates it a little bit further. And, you know, this would be available to really any person that is using Microsoft 365, right? Even without this integration of Microsoft 365, it's still a very powerful tool and available to anyone. And we're currently in a pilot stage with this right now. I don't know what the outcome of the pilot stage will be, right? This is just why we're doing the pilot, to understand really, you know, what is the value provided by this tool. Next down, you've got Copilot Studio, which is really this graphical lower code for building our own Copilots, right? The most simplest fashion of this is, hey, point it at a website, point it at a PDF, and then have it ground and answer questions specifically from that information. And it can do a lot more because it connects into more of the Microsoft Power Platform. Now, you know, really this, while it, you know, could be still a pretty wide audience, like this would take some learning, right? You kind of have to be a power user. You'd have to be both understanding of this platform and understanding of the content you're trying to build it around. So it's, you know, it's kind of a smaller user base, but these tools could scale. And then finally, you've got the Azure AI Studio, which is what I think of like the development, the individual building blocks of all these AI components that Microsoft provides. And that's really going to be targeted at developers or people with a much higher technical skill set, but it's very powerful in what it can do. And I think that that's really kind of the furthest tip in sort of power. But again, it wouldn't be something everyone would jump into and start using. I personally would have no idea what to do here, but I'm very excited about what that might bring. You know, kind of 2 closing slides here. I know we're coming close to time. when we bring in these generative AI tools, right, it's very common for us to look at larger use cases, but I want us to think about this, kind of from the sense of a knowledge worker, which I'm assuming the majority of the folks on this call are, if not everyone. And what we do as a knowledge worker, right, we have some sort of trigger, right? Someone sends us a text message or an email, or we get an alert out of Workday, and then we've got to somehow analyze that. Then we've got to, most likely have to collaborate. At least most of us do have to collaborate with somebody else. We've got to build a plan. We've got to execute on that plan. Then we might want to review our results, right? All of these things, sometimes this happens as fast as, hey, where do you want to go to lunch? And sometimes it's big, like a strategic decision change we want to make. And, sometimes we want to put Copilot kind of to just do all this for us at once. But when we bring Copilot really into how we work, we can use it in all these individual pieces, right? And that's really where we're seeing a lot of gains at, is by, really the sum of marginal gains of saying I can use it at each of the steps throughout this cycle, and I can gain that 25% faster with 40% higher quality. But if you think about, these things stack together. If I do my initial analysis of understanding the problem, defining the problem a little bit better, my collaboration is going to go a lot better. And if my collaboration is a lot more clear, my planning is going to go a lot more clearly. And if I execute faster because I'm using AI to execute, this whole cycle can run faster and with a higher output. And when we bring that wider to the entire organization, we can think, well, as a knowledge worker, I'm interacting with this organization, right? And looking at this kind of like a people, process, and technology group is, even without changes, right? And we're all driving to make the organization better as a whole, right? But let's take something like the ERP implementation. That is a huge lift, and it's going to be very valuable to do. However, in the meantime, when I'm interacting with our existing ERP systems, right, I can actually still use Copilot kind of within my own cycle of knowledge work to really understand what's coming out of the organization and make sure my inputs are going back in at that 40% higher quality. And that's really what I see from this individual level of empowerment of people. I'm really trying to bring Copilot into your work. And this is available, that 25%, that 40% higher quality, that is out of the box. That is not leveraging, complex integrations or some highly customized AI tool. This is here. It's right here today, and we're just at the beginning. The more that we, integrate AI into our other platforms, the more we integrate it into our enterprise data, it's just going to become more powerful. But learning how to use the tool in these ways is just going to make it faster as more and more AI tools become available for you to use. I think that wraps up. I appreciate it, everyone.
Right. Thanks so much, Brent. And so we have now concluded, and we've reached the Q&A portion of our session this morning. But I want to first just give a huge thank you to all of our speakers, to Nick, Andre, to Brent, Zach, and John. And please, everyone, join me in giving them a virtual round of applause. They have a lot of expertise in their various areas, and so definitely reach out if you have questions. We are here as a resource for campus, and that's why we put on data days, and that's why we want to try and help all of campus, right? So before we move into Q&A, I do want us to I would like to emphasize that we very much value your feedback. So I'm gonna drop a link in here into the chat, but we also have our QR code here for our feedback. And we would very much greatly appreciate your feedback on the session whenever you get a chance to. Oh, there we go. Sorry, Nick. All right, Nick beat me to it. Thanks, Nick. But yeah, so with that, let's go ahead and move forward with Q&A. So if you've got a question, please feel free to throw it into the chat, or yeah, raise your hand. I see, and you can come off mute. I believe you should all be able to do that. So Ray, I see you've got your hand up. Thought I saw Ray had his hand up. Okay. All right, anybody have any questions? Okay, so Kira Freeman says, how can we best align rapidly evolving trends in data security with pre-drafted RFPs and contract agreements to ensure compliance and adaptability? So any of our various speakers want to speak to that? I don't know if John, you're most appropriate for that one.
That is probably a great question. And a lot of times I'm going to say the issue you're referring to is really a difficult piece to get with kind of RFP and contract agreements. RFPs are usually pretty easy to do. The contract agreements always come back and depend on the vendor. Some vendors are okay with something that's already created by the Institute, others are not. But that's also one of the reasons we have, if you've been part of some of those before, there's a kind of a Georgia Tech piece called a Georgia Tech Data Processing Agreement. And that kind of spells out the rules around Georgia Tech data being in various systems. So a lot of times what will happen is the contracts are negotiated out at a compliance level that's for the Institute and the state of Georgia, but they don't worry about the data part in that. They deal with that in the data processing agreement. But that is kind of a big question. How do you do that on the contract side and in the agreement side? And I don't know that anybody's ever figured out how to successfully do that with every contract. So it's usually contract by contract, unfortunately. I don't know if I answered your question, but.
Yeah, thanks for that, John.
You absolutely provided clarity, so thank you for that. And I know that is something that we're working through, and I appreciate it, John. I know you know exactly what we're speaking of, but thank you for that.
It's rough. It's rough for everybody.
All right, thanks for that question, Kira. If anyone else has any questions. All right, I'm not seeing any in the chat. I'm not seeing any hands up. So I guess with that, we're very happy to give you a little bit of your time back. You can take a longer break. Our next session doesn't start until 10:30 a.m. And so you can find the link on the program schedule in case you did not receive the calendar invite. But please come back. We'll see you at 10:30 for our morning session 2. Thank you all very much for attending, and